Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our online Sunday evening sermon. We look forward to studying together over the internet in this online sermon, Sunday evening, May the 31st. Lord willing, this will be the last of these types of completely online sermons. If the men confer and agree today, then next week we'll be in the auditorium, and so that will be a good thing if that materializes. We'll let you know more about that, and we'll be getting news out to you. But be aware, because we've got folks who've been listening and participating in our online work from other locations, and we will continue, Lord willing, our live stream. So if you are off in a distant place, but taking advantage of these online resources, please know that we will continue our online streaming even when we return into the auditorium for more regular type meetings. But we thank you all. It's been a big encouragement to hear different ones talk about listening and participating. And I've actually received several comments from our young people about the lessons that have been given and the things that we have been talking about. And that's been a great encouragement to me. That is really very good. Unfortunately, because of the way things have been, we've not been able to have Bible classes for our young people. That's a bad thing, and hopefully that will be short-lived as well. Hopefully within a few weeks we'll be able to get back to regular Bible classes for our kids. But I thought, since we've not been able to have our conventional Bible classes for kids, and since several of them had commented to me that they have been listening and benefiting from the lessons taught online, I thought we would target one toward them tonight about a subject that I think we know pretty well. We've talked about it plenty of times in the past, but it always does us good to be reminded so that we ourselves know well the truth of God, and also that we prepare ourselves to take it to others and teach them. And so this is an old question tonight, but one that deserves our careful attention. We want to talk about the 10 Commandments. And we're going to approach our study tonight in the old-fashioned who, what, where, when kind of mode, and answer those basic questions about the 10 Commandments. Now again, remember, we want to understand this, obviously. We want to really be informed and well advised about these truths so that we can go out and share this information with others, because this is a thing that is very generally misunderstood in the religious world, and so we need to be ready to answer. The 10 Commandments. What are the 10 Commandments? Obviously, they're commandments, right? And there are 10 of them. Therefore, they constitute a listing of commandments. Here's the list. Now, we find this list of the 10 Commandments recorded two complete places in the Old Testament: Exodus 20, verses 1 through 17, and Deuteronomy 5, verses 6 through 21. This is not the full text of either one of those, but this is just sort of a summary list of the 10 Commandments. Let's read them. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall make no idols. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Keep the Sabbath day holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet. And so notice how these are worded. They are basically do this and don't do this. In the biblical language, you shall, you shall, you shall. But notice, there are also a number of them that says you shall not do these things. So the list of the 10 Commandments is basically do this, don't do that. They are commandments. We are aware, and we need to make others aware, that this is not the full list of the laws that God gave in the Old Testament times by the man Moses. We know that these are basic moral principles, important moral laws that God wanted His people to observe, but this is not the full law that God gave at that time. For instance, if you look at this list, there's not one single reference to how to make sacrifices. But we know the making of sacrifices was a very important part of the Old Testament system. This includes no information about the priests, about who would be qualified to serve as priests and what their functions would be and so forth. So clearly this is not a complete listing of all the laws that God had for His people in that time, but these constitute an important listing of moral rules that God wanted His people to observe. That's what the Ten Commandments are. That's what they are. The second question is, when were they given? Well, I ask you to recount your memory of Old Testament history. We know that the children of Israel had been in bondage as slaves in Egypt. God sent the man Moses to tell Pharaoh, "Let my people go." And after a series of 10 very harsh plagues that were sent upon the nation of Egypt, Pharaoh finally agreed and sent the Israelites away. Changed his mind later, but he sent them away. They were delivered from Egyptian bondage. As they traveled away from Egypt toward the ultimate destination of the Promised Land, after just a few weeks, they came to the Mount Sinai. And on Mount Sinai, Moses went up, and God met him there on the mountain and gave him a law. In Exodus chapter 19, verse 25, notice this, by the way, Exodus 20, that's the first listing that we just mentioned of the Ten Commandments. Moses went down unto the people. So this was his first trip, his first trip up on the mountain. He made numerous trips, more than one. On his first trip up the mountain, he comes down and he speaks to the people. Through Moses, God spake, saying, "I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And the list goes then into the Ten Commandments. Observe right here that initially these were spoken commandments. They hadn't been written down yet. And so the first giving of the Ten Commandments was God. On the first trip Moses made up to the mountain, God gave him these Ten Commandments, just in oral form, and Moses repeated them to the people. They hadn't been written down yet. When we get to chapter 24, verse 12, the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me." So he goes up to the mountain again. "Come up to me into the mount and be there, and I will give thee tables of stone and a law and commandments which I have written, that thou mayest teach them." And so God calls Moses up to the mountain again. And this time there was something about tables of stone that he had written. You know, God would do the writings on the tables of stone. And so that was the time in which they were first recorded. This work on stone was done by God Himself, not by Moses. But you remember what happened to those tablets of stone, those initial ones? Remember what happened when Moses came down? Moses turned, he went down from the mount, and the two tables of the testimony were in his hand. So here's those tables of stone. They're in his hand now. God has given him these tables of stone written with the Ten Commandments. The tables were written on both sides. On the one side and on the other side they were written. And the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God graven upon the tables. Man, stop there for a minute and you'd think, these are really, really special, right? This is the product of God's own hand. He has written these commands on the tables of stone. But it came to pass, as soon as Moses, came nigh to the camp, that he saw the calf. Remember the golden calf that the people had constructed, and they were worshiping it and dancing. And Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. I think your first reaction to that news would be, whoa, wait a minute, Moses. That's a bad thing you just did, Moses. You should not have done that. These are very special tables of stone upon which God has engraved with His own hand, and you've just thrown them down and broken them? That's not a good thing, Moses. You're probably going to be in trouble for doing that. But of course, we know that there is no indication that God rebuked him in regards to that action. This is probably a great example of what sometimes we refer to as righteous indignation. Moses was angry, But he was angry with a cause, and it was a right cause. It should make someone angry. It should have made him angry. It should have made others angry to see the people worshiping an idol. He threw down the tables of stone and broke them. So thus, when we get to chapter 34, the Lord said to Moses, "Hew thee 2 tables of stone like unto the first, and I will write upon these tables the words that were on the first table, which thou breakest. And be ready in the morning, and come up in the morning into Mount Sinai." And he hewed 2 tables of stone like unto the first, and Moses rose up early in the morning and went up unto the Mount Sinai, as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hand the 2 tables of stone. So God makes them again. Again, I always thought it's significant that there's no apparent rebuke of Moses, no indication that God was upset that Moses had done this. He just says, bring 2 tables of stone and we'll make them again. And so he did. And so that is the answer to the question, when were these 10 commandments given? The 10 commandments were given there at Mount Sinai to Moses as a part of the broader law that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai. Now, a really important question in regards to these 10 commandments is the question, to whom were they given? We've already noted the setting. Remember, the setting was the people of Israel coming out of Egyptian bondage, come to Mount Sinai. Moses is called up. God gives the law. So let's emphasize that the 10 commandments were a part of the law that God gave to the children of Israel. Sometimes we often refer to them, as they are referred to in the New Testament, as the Jews. The 10 commandments were given to the children of Israel, to the Jews. Specifically, this was their law. In Exodus chapter 19, verse 3, beginning, Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine." Notice, when Moses met with God, he was to say to the house of Jacob, tell the children of Israel. So the law given on Mount Sinai was to that people specifically, not to everybody in general. There are plenty of other nations in the world at that time. But God wasn't giving this law to others. He was giving it specifically to the children of Israel. Now, there's an important word here. Notice he says, keep my covenant. And so the giving of this law constituted a covenant. What is a covenant? A covenant is an agreement between 2 parties. 2 parties make an agreement in regards to their actions to one another. And so this law that God gave to Moses at Mount Sinai was a covenant, an agreement between God and the children of Israel, okay? That's really important because that law is not for us. Parts of those laws we wouldn't even begin to consider keeping. For instance, as we mentioned earlier, the making of animal sacrifices, the burning of sacrifices, the special inherited ordination of priests. You had to be in a certain family line and descendancy. We don't do that, right? There's a lot of that law of Moses we wouldn't even consider observing, but the 10 Commandments were a part of that law, a covenant between God and the children of Israel. The fourth of the 10 Commandments is the commandment to keep the Sabbath day. And that one is, the whole law was a covenant between God and the children of Israel, but that one in particular is mentioned as a sign of the covenant between God and Israel. Notice in Exodus 34, beginning verse 27, the Lord said unto Moses, "Write thou these words, for after the tenor of these words I have made," notice, "a covenant with thee and with Israel." And he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He did neither eat bread nor drink water. And he wrote upon the tables the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. And so, again, specifically, the commands were, the 10 Commandments were mentioned as a part of the covenant that God made with Israel. It was to them, it was not to all men of that time, and they were not to us. And so we need to observe that. Notice the Lord, verse 31, the Lord spake to Moses, saying, Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath. The children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. So I hope that we've got that pinned down carefully, and notice that that's the way it was. That's to whom the Ten Commandments and that whole law at Sinai, given to the children of Israel. All right, I hope you see that we've answered some very basic and important questions about the Ten Commandments. What are they, or were they? When were they given? To whom they were given? Let's ask why they were given. All right, so here's a set of rules. And if you can keep the rules, somebody says, here's the rule book, and here's the rules you've got to keep. And if you can keep the rules, you can go to heaven. You can save yourself by careful rule keeping. They were never intended for that. They were never intended as a means by which people could save themselves because of the simple problem that no one can keep those rules perfectly. Paul spoke about these things in Galatians chapter 3, beginning verse 16. Galatians 3, beginning verse 16, to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. Okay, so there were some promises made to Abraham. We know about those. We can go all the way back in the book of Genesis to chapter 12, where they were first mentioned. And we so often recite the three promises to Abraham. He was promised that his descendants would become a great nation, numerous people. He was promised, secondly, that there would be a land. They would possess a land, a promised land. The third promise was that through Abraham's seed, or through his descendants, and the word there is seed, through his descendants or seed, all nations of the earth would be blessed. So Abraham received some promises. Paul goes on to say that the covenant, notice that was a covenant, a promise, an agreement between God and Abraham. The covenant would, this I say that the covenant, now he's changing tunes. This covenant right here is the covenant that we were just mentioning, the covenant with the Israelites, the nation of Israel, the children of Israel. The covenant which was 430 years after cannot disannul that it should make the promise of none effect. So, God made promises to Abraham. Hundreds of years later, He made this covenant with the children of Israel, as we were just describing. But that didn't destroy the promise that God had made to Abraham. Specifically, it didn't do away with the promise that through Abraham's descendants or seed, all nations of the earth would be blessed. So let's take that again, make sure we got it right. To Abraham and his seed were promises made, and the covenant, which was 430 years later, cannot disannul or do away with the promises that were made. So he says, wherefore? Wherefore then serveth the law? That's our exact question, right? So what was the purpose of the law? What was the purpose of the law? If it didn't do away with the promises that God made to Abraham, what was the purpose of the law? It was added because of transgressions till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. Notice this. It was added because of transgressions. There's the answer to the question. The giving of the law made people aware of sin. It actually helped also to restrain them from committing sins, because they knew now what God wanted them to do. God had been very specific to them. Do this, don't do that. And so it identified sin. It made them aware of sin. It hopefully helped to keep them from sinning as much as possible. But it also was there to show man his inability to save himself by his own works. because the rules couldn't be kept perfectly. The only one who ever kept them perfectly was Jesus Christ himself. And so the law was added because of transgressions, because of the problem of sin. The giving of the law didn't change the promise to Abraham, but it was because of the problem of sin that the law was given. So we know why they were given. Here's a really important question to deal with. How long were they given? For how long were they given? They were given to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. They were given to identify sin. They were given to make people aware of sin, to hopefully hold them back from sin, but also to make clear that man can't save himself by his own meritorious works. They needed something else. They needed the fulfillment of that promise about Abraham's seed. Through Abraham's seed would all nations of the earth be blessed. Go back. This is the text we were just looking at in Galatians chapter 3. Notice that last phrase. It was given because that's talking about the law, because he had just asked the question, wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgression, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. There's your answer. Right there in Galatians 3, where Paul identifies the reason why the law was given, he also tells how long it was to last. Till or until the seed should come. The promised seed was and is Jesus Christ. The law that God gave to Moses would last only till the seed came. This is really important to understand, that the law that God gave to Moses, not any part of it was ever intended to last forever. It was always just until the promised seed, just until Jesus came. That was the intention of the law that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai, including the 10 Commandments. All right, so we know what they were, we know when they were given and to whom, and we know why they were given and for how long they were given. I think the really big question that we have, and this is the one that we have to deal with when we're talking to other people in our time. When we talk to other religious people, we need to really be able to answer this question. Are these commandments still valid? That's really the important question. Are the 10 Commandments still valid? Now, if you were to take a general poll of people, if you just went out on the streets of our community and asked the question, are the 10 Commandments still in force? Must we observe the 10 Commandments? An overwhelming answer that you would get to that would be yes. The 10 Commandments are still in place. In fact, it's not uncommon to see the 10 Commandments, and sometimes they're actually pictured on sort of representations of the tables of stone. Sometimes in many communities you see them on the courthouse square, maybe a listing of the 10 Commandments, or you see them in public buildings. Used to be you would see them when you went into public schools, but they've mainly been removed now because of court actions and so forth. But you very often see listings and representations of the 10 Commandments, and the vast majority of people say that 10 Commandments are still valid. But we have to really emphasize that the proper answer to that question is no. The 10 Commandments are not still valid. We are not obligated to keep the 10 Commandments or any part of the law of Moses. The text that we often cite, and I hope all of us have this pretty much at ready recall, Colossians 2, verses 14 and 16. In Colossians 2, verse 14, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us. Now stop a minute. Handwriting of ordinances, some kind of handwritten ordinances. Okay, what were they? Okay, just hang on to that. But he's talking about some ordinances are rules, ordinances are laws, right? Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. So something was nailed to the cross of Jesus. Some kind of handwritten ordinances was nailed to the cross of Jesus. What were they? Well, verse 16 helps us know what he's talking about. He says, because that happened, because these handwritten ordinances were nailed to the cross of Jesus, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. So because these ordinances are gone, they've been nailed to the cross of Jesus, You should not be judged anymore in regard to meat and drink. Well, the law of Moses had specific rules about, for instance, the kind of food you could eat. There was clean and unclean animals, for instance. You could eat the meat of cows, for instance, but you couldn't eat the meat of pigs. You could eat fish if the fish had scales and fins, but if a fish was like a catfish and didn't have scales, you couldn't eat that. There were specific rules about that. So, you go out to the catfish place, or you go catch some catfish, and you eat catfish now. Or you go to the barbecue place and you get some pork barbecue. Somebody goes, you shouldn't be doing that because the law of Moses says you're not supposed to eat those kind. No, let no man judge you in respect to meat. We're not obligated by that anymore. You can eat your catfish. You can eat your pork barbecue. There were holy days. We know, and they're specified in the law of Moses. There were various holy days that they had to keep. They were to observe them very carefully. So all that's been done away. It was nailed to the cross of Jesus. That law that included all those rules been nailed to the cross of Jesus. Special emphasis here on the Sabbath days. Well, wait a minute. The Sabbath day, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, that was the fourth commandment, right? That's part of the Ten Commandments. One of the Ten Commandments is even listed. This is not a categorical listing of all the rules of the Old Testament, obviously. This is not a mention of all the rules that God gave Moses on Mount Sinai. It's just a partial listing, a representative listing. But in that representative listing is the Sabbath day. You should not be judged about whether or not you're keeping the Sabbath day, because that was a part of the law of Moses, and that's all been abolished. That was all nailed to the cross of Jesus. Now, this lines up with what we mentioned just a minute ago from Galatians chapter 3. The law was till the seed came. The law was until Jesus. Here we get a little more clarity on at what point in the life of Jesus. It was when he died, when he was nailed to the cross. The law of Moses was abolished, including the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments were just a part of that much larger law of Moses. When we explain that, you're almost immediately going to get a follow-up question. Do you mean, therefore, that it's okay to violate the rules of the Ten Commandments? Remember, the Ten Commandments had things in there like, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not murder. So, are you telling me then that it's okay to go out and steal and commit murder because all of that has been done away with when Jesus died on the cross? Of course, the answer is obviously no. And the reason why it's not okay to do those things is because those kind of rules are repeated in the New Testament. In fact, the concepts of the Ten Commandments are all repeated in the New Testament, with the exception of commandment number 4. You remember what it was? Commandment number 4 was the Sabbath days. And that one is not repeated in the New Testament. But the others are. Thou shalt have no other gods. Do not serve idols. Do not take God's name in vain. Honor your father and mother. Do not kill. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not covet. All of those instructions are repeated, some of them in verbatim form in the New Testament. So why should we not kill? Do not kill. Why? Because Moses said so in the Old Testament? No, that law is not for us. The reason we should not kill is because that instruction is repeated for us in the New Testament. Why should we not steal? Because the Ten Commandments said so? No. We should not steal because that's repeated for us in Ephesians 4:28. Let him that stole steal no more. So you see, in answer to the challenge we sometimes get, when we explain that all of the Old Testament law of Moses has been abolished, people really get sort of agitated. Do you mean the Ten Commandments are not in effect? Well, not because they were the Ten Commandments of the law of Moses, but 9 of the Ten Commandments are repeated. And so now we have those same rules for us because they're found in the New Testament. These are our laws. These are rules for us. Not because they're the Ten Commandments of the Old Testament, but because they are in the New Testament law of Jesus Christ. Okay, there's a quick review study of the Ten Commandments. And I hope our young people have been able to listen carefully and observe these truths. This is something that we've talked about before, but always a big question that people have in their minds about the Ten Commandments. A lot of people misunderstand this. And we've talked tonight about what, when, to whom, why, for how long, but especially this last one, are these still valid? Are they still for us? And hopefully we've got that all pinned down in our minds very well and can teach it to others. Thanks for being with us tonight in our online sermon here on Sunday evening. We look forward to being back in the building very soon, but our live stream of our Sunday services and our Wednesday Bible classes will still continue, Lord willing. We thank you for being a part of this study tonight. God bless you.